Welcome to the SIWIKE podcast, the only podcast that shares the stuff you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. The SIWIKE podcast, the stuff I wish I knew earlier.
Hello everyone out there. I thought I'd finally get started with my SIWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. The podcast that shares what you didn't know you needed to know about jobs, careers, and life. So it's been interesting staying indoors for this COVID crisis, and I thought I'd just get started with doing this podcast because I've been putting it off for I don't even know how long. And I thought I'd just kind of get down to it and do it. Production value might be very, very low, but I thought a lot of the content that I can share would resonate with a lot of folks. So I wanted to do a bit of an introductory podcast just to share more about myself for those that don't know. So Luki Danukarjanto. Luki is fine. I'm Indonesian, which is where the last name comes from, for those that are curious. The fun fact about me that I usually share is that I'm ancestrally Chinese, so I'm actually part of the Chan lineage. And the fun fact is my dad was a Tan when he was born, and due to some civil unrest and some challenges with the country, he decided to change his last name to Danukarjanto. And if you're ever in Indonesia and need a resourceful worker, then you can ask for an Danukarjanto, and they'll get you one right away. That's a bit about me. And then I basically ended up moving to Toronto when I was very young. I ended up doing a degree in computer science, of all things, just because, well, one, my dad worked at IBM, so it seemed to make sense. The dot-com bubble was growing at the time, so we didn't know it was a bubble at the time, or at least I didn't. And three, teenage boy wanting to get into computer games, seems like it made sense. Unfortunately, when I graduated, the dot-com bubble just burst. So it was kind of like this time where just before 9/11 had happened, the dot-com bubble burst, and then shortly thereafter, SARS took place. So it's eerily reminiscent of what's happening right now. But unfortunately, all three of them are happening at the same time right now. I graduated during that time, and it was pretty tough for folks in tech to get a job. I luckily had some co-op experience, so I was getting some offers, but not necessarily the ones that I wanted. But as luck would have it, I had a friend whose brother, he was looking for a coder, a developer, so he helped me get an interview, and I got the job. And turns out after a couple of months of doing that, I realized, you know what, I don't particularly like coding. Well, what do you do in that circumstance when you spent 4 years training for a degree and then realize, well, this really isn't for you? But as luck would have it, the company that I ended up working for was Deloitte. I was on the technology consulting side. So I basically moved around into the firm, more into the business side. So I did coding, I became a technical lead, did functional business analysis type work, did testing, change management, training, project management, advisory, and spent over 12 years there. And by the end of it, I was a global subject matter expert in sourcing and procurement technologies, which happens when you stay at a place for over 12 years. And why a lot of folks want to speak to me is I actually used to also run their undergrad campus recruiting program. So from 2006 to 2015 when I left, something around there, then I literally had a list that said yes or no for anyone that got hired across all the universities across Canada. So all the things that I share about resumes, interviews, and networking come from my experience. I was heavy into the talent management side. So in the experience recruiting, I actually was part of that leadership team. Our group hired a couple hundred every year. Got into kind of the practice management, the people management of my team. And that's where I kind of understood kind of the coaching and the mentoring side that I actually had an interest in. And well, it seemed like a pretty good path. I was a senior manager. Next step would have been partner. And for those that don't know, partner, that's kind of a C-level executive at the top of the heap. And folks sometimes ask, well, why did you end up leaving? And my short answer is family. As a management consultant, as a consultant, I traveled quite a bit. In my 12 years there, I was probably on a plane roughly 9 of those years. So Monday morning, would wake up for a 6, 7 a.m. flight, 8 a.m. if I was lucky, and then Thursday would come back, spend the weekend with the family and loved ones, and then head back out. So I ended up having some kids, and watching my son grow up over FaceTime wasn't exactly the ideal of parenthood, of being a dad that I wanted. The firm was really good in trying to keep me local, and then trying to find me roles that would kind of suit my needs. But uh, unfortunately, there was one where I knew the expectation would be that eventually I would have to travel, right? And at the end of the day, I was always a little bit entrepreneurial. I wanted to open up my own restaurant. I wanted to open up a tutoring school. So I finally got the courage to start something. And I ended up becoming a career coach. So I started a little venture where I was hopefully going to unlock people's career potential. And now what I do is work with a lot of post-secondary institutes, with companies as well, usually in kind of the entry level, and help people in transition. So whether they be graduating and going into a job, or they're kind of in ready for the next step in their career, that sort of thing, I'll help unlock their career potential, which was the subtitle of my book, Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, How to Unlock Your Career Potential, which is really what this podcast is about. It's sharing some of the insights that were in the book, and then extending on that and adding to it, because the book was published in 2017, and since then I've learned way more. So trying to share that insights with the world is what I want to do. So that's kind of me in a little bit more of a nutshell. But some of my goals and aims are to, one, I usually tell people that I want to weave mentorship into the fabric of society. And I'm doing that by starting that by making Toronto the mentorship capital of the world. And how I intend to do that actually has changed a little bit, because originally I was going to find all the mentoring programs and make them more efficient, as management consultants do, help them to get best practices and all that. But what I realized is that mentoring programs have a fundamental flaw right now, where they have a mentor as a bottleneck. So as a mentor, you might be able to help 1 to maybe 5 people if you really take on a lot of people. But really, there's a bottleneck there, and there's really not enough mentors out there. And because you're set for a period of time, 4 weeks, 4 months, a year, then people often can't make that commitment. So what I've encountered, or how I approached it instead, is to make Toronto the menteeship capital of the world. And what that is equipping people with skills, soft skills on how to network, on empathy, positivity, and really understanding how do you take someone that you may not know, and ask them for guidance and advice, and have them be your mentor. And mentoring can happen for just one session, or it can be longer term. So to make Toronto the menteeship capital of the world, then it went to my second goal, which is to elevate education. So all those skills that you learn as a mentee, well, why not put that into the education system? Because what if at the beginning of school, you learn things like time management, what is your purpose, effective communication, empathy, sales, those types of things. What sort of great foundation would you have, so that next, when you do learn things like accounting, or things like coding or whatever, then it makes it a much more worthwhile endeavor. Even basic skills like learning to learn, memory techniques. What I've found over the past couple of years is that there's actually no such thing as a bad memory. It's the difference between a trained memory and an untrained memory. So imagine we were learning those types of skills in post-secondary, or even in high school, or even in elementary school, if we could do that. So that's kind of my second big goal, to elevate education. And the third big one was to positively impact 1 billion people. And through the educational efforts, through the mentorship, my goal is to impact as many people as I can. So I did the calculations, and if I were to spend 1 second with every one of those 1 billion people, it would actually take me 32 years to do so. So that doesn't seem like it's physically possible. So what I've opted for instead is there's a theory that within your lifetime you impact about 90,000 people. So my goal is to positively impact at least those 90,000 people, and then to have each of those impact 90,000 people, and then I'll get to my billion pretty quickly. But if I can make some systemic changes, like through the elevating of education and to build more mentors, then I think I can get pretty close to that billion during my lifetime. So what you can look forward to in this podcast is me sharing my SWIKE, the stuff I wish I knew earlier. And it could be in all facets of life. It'll be things like job, so helping people with resumes, interviews, networking, and even kind of job search strategy. So those basic things. And then also in the realm of careers. So things like, what is your purpose? Why am I here? How do I find something that I love and keep on doing it? So thinking about that. And then the third part is on life. So a lot of things that I've uncovered is things like psychology and self-care, right? So making sure that are you taking care of your health? Health as in, are you sleeping right, eating and exercising? Because if you're not doing those types of things, then everything else gets so much harder. So helping you in regards to that. And then there's health in terms of relationship health, mental health. There's things like financial health as well. So those little things that if you start moving the needle on them, then everything kind of compounds and escalates so that you have the ideal life that you want. So I'll share that probably in me kind of talking about different resources and things that I've learned, hopefully having some guests and having conversations, and maybe doing some excerpts from talks and workshops that I've done either live online or otherwise. So that's what you can look forward to in the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier podcast. And hopefully you'll join me for the first episode upcoming. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for joining us on the SWIKE Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier, the podcast. If you like the podcast, please subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you found this podcast. And if you can give us a review, that would be very appreciated. Feel free to contact me on LinkedIn at Luki Danu, LUKIDANU, and the same on most social media platforms. And I look forward to hearing from you. Thanks. Bye.